You're listening to the Bleeding Goat podcast. In this series, we're going through the 5th edition monster manual, monster by monster, with the aim of using the lore as storytellers to give our players a way to engage in our world. This episode, we're covering the Azer. Before we really get into this, the Azer is a solid example of why I started this podcast. As presented, it's a weak entry. So as we go through what's in the book, I'll throw in where I think it fell short and maybe some things we can do about it. My problems with the Azer starts at the very beginning. Azers are described as resembling dwarves, except with metallic looking skin and flames where their hair or beard would be. So they're fire dwarves. Oh, they live in the elemental plane of fire. Okay, so they're planar dwarves. If you give your players that description, that's what they're gonna call them, planar dwarves, and probably call them that for the rest of their lives. If I were playing in the Star Trek universe, I would be so irked if my players kept referring to Klingons as space orcs. And I want to be irked here because Azer are not dwarves. I'm sorry, what's that? They're excellent craftsmen and miners that live in mountains. We go on to learn that Azer and Ifrit, a type of genie, were once allies. And during that time, as expert miners and crafters, they built for the Ifrit the fabled city of brass. Shortly after its construction, the Ifrit betrayed the Azer. No one saw that coming. And now there's open hostility, but not war between the two races. That is a lot of information to unpack while still being pretty vague. I didn't want to do a deep dive into something that might be covered later on, so I skimmed through the Genie and Ifrit section. And what do you know? Not a single mention of Azer and not much about the city of brass either. The Azer entry at this point is mostly shaping up to be a dud. We have a race that looks like something else. Its major defining characteristics is a relationship another creature doesn't even acknowledge. And that's when the light bulb went off. Azer are marginalized. And if you don't believe me, let's refer to the section on elementals in the monster manual. And I quote, "The races of genies, including Jinn and Ifrit, form the most important civilizations on the elemental planes." They weren't even mentioned in the top two because the top two were types of genies. Dang. So their history and their contributions are largely forgotten or ignored. And even so, that's not very helpful for a stated purpose of getting our players to engage in a story. Because how can I engage in something I don't know is missing? So far, the lore of Azer is just exposition, and we need to make them real. Before we attempt to do that, we're gonna have to first cover other sections to see if there's anything we can kind of tie together. Azer are made, not born. Each Azer is constructed by its parent and a piece of the Azer's internal flame. That's how they create an offspring. Every Azer, so the book says, is sculpted with unique features. And the crafting process is what limits Azer population growth. In addition to this, the book reminds us that Azers are not actually dwarf cousins, but they're elementals, so they thus don't eat, drink, or sleep. So not a lot to engage with there either. But then there's a dim spot in the darkness. It's under the heading of Masters of Metal and Gems. There we learn that Azer do infrequently travel across the material plane in source of rare minerals and gems. Additionally, their skills as craftsmen has caused them to be called by magic to the material plane to forge beautiful gifts and powerful magic items. At least here, we begin to have a way that our players might come to know or engage with the Azer. Unfortunately, the book doesn't do what they did with Aarakocra, where they gave us very specific details, the rod of 7 parts and its shards spread across the multiverse. But if we just apply the same template to the Azer, we get a better sense of how to use them in our story. For example, let's say that the Azer intentionally traveled to the material plane for unobtainium. Moreover, they are famous for the colossal statue construct of ever-burning life. We've now named a place where we can find Azer, or might run into them, and a defining object guarding a city that is sure to make our players ask what that's all about. You can riff with that as you please. Maybe unobtainium is known to reside in deserts, and it's really quartz sand, which is the highly quality sand we use to make clear glass. For an Azer, this is considered a rare mineral, but it's crucial in developing the perfect eyes for its meiotic progeny. Maybe the magic item is less grand. It's currently broken, but the maker's mark leads players to look for the Azer. Azer are listed as lawful, Again, historically, so were dwarves. So we're back to Planar Dwarfs. But we can choose to see this as another hurdle that might be in play regarding the creation of progeny. Maybe, like a doctorate's degree, you have to present your work to a panel for judgment, and maybe it takes centuries to become skilled enough as an Azer craftsman to be worthy of such an honor. Lawful societies, thus, are rife with black market opportunities. An entire society defined around your abilities as an artisan will put a lot of stress to secure the best materials, reinforcing planar exploration. Even so, it's not entirely clear what happens when you're splintering off your internal flame. Is there a limit to how many times it can be done? How beholden is one Azer to its creator? When we answer these questions, we want to avoid answers without consequences for our players. If Azers can run out of eternal flame, maybe not all wish to construct, which is an opportunity to meet an Azer no longer living on the plane of fire, because they don't want to be bound by their civilization's rule for procreation. It also changes the narrative on how willing an Azer is to die if itself has 1,000 clones. Finally, why do they look like dwarves? Like, just why? Surely there's a renegade out there suggesting they change with the times. Coming back to the Azer-Efreet relationship. The Efreet tried to enslave the Azer to prevent the secrets of the famed Brass City's construction from becoming known. So it's claimed. We are told that while the Azer and Efreet skirmish, the only thing that keeps them from all-out war is the Efreet's fear they will divulge these secrets. These secrets can be a big point of storytelling, because how many people would pay for them? With the Efreet both wanting to secure these secrets for themselves and prevent others from getting them, that's a solid hook with at least 3 factions: Azer, Efreet, and your employer. But the secrets don't even have to be grand. There are plenty of examples of one culture taking credit for another's accomplishments, or using any old reason as pretext for enslavement. So while it's tempting to look at this from the perspective of a people who have been tread upon, I'm not really sure that story is accurate. History is written by the victor, and I'm pretty sure the CR11 plus creatures with the most important civilization in the elemental plane of fire is the victor, not the CR2 who can't even bother to be given a unique appearance. So let's roll with the idea that they're marginalized, but choose to read the entry from the point of view of a little guy. Azer are apparently so good at crafting that they did what Genie cannot. They built the city of brass. They're so good at crafting that despite Genie's natural superiority, Genie could not subdue them. They're so good at crafting that every centennial of the attempted enslavement, they hold a celebration to show off the most majestic works imaginable, and then melt them down as a not so subtle reminder to the Efreet that they could do the same at any time. Invite your players to that celebration as a sandbox, and they'll have the opportunity to meet all sorts of Azer, partake in plays with audience participation, play Trap the Genie in the Lamp, and other carnival games inspired by the Azer's history, before inevitably someone, maybe even your characters, try to steal those majestic works, or the Efreet try to sabotage the event.